I've been thinking about the future a lot more than I used to. Not in general, like my future specifically. I didn't have time growing up to do that. Like, I couldn't afford it. And I mean literally. From 15 to 25, I spent most days, I would wake up, hop out of bed, dress, shower, shave, hop on the car, on the bus, on the bike, head to work, and grind and grind. I'd go home, sleep, and repeat. I mean, my first teaching job was at a traditionally prestigious high school. I got the subject and the grade level that I wanted. I was even an honors teacher, and I used every single moment of my planning period, that 50-minute block every teacher gets. I would grade and print and plan and conference, prep labs and the like, and I'd work and work. Even 5 minutes into the start of the next period, I'd still be rushing and planning and grading. I'd stay late after school. I ran a club. I came in on a snow day once just to get grades done on time. Who the hell was that for? 25 pull-ups, 25 dips, 10 sets of 180, 8 sets of 70, curls, repeat. I liked lifting weights or swimming laps. I hate running, but I love lifting. I could see the change in real time. It felt good. It felt empowering. And it was for the good of me. The work I did matters, and nobody could take it from me. There was no one to revalue, devalue, or change the meaning of what it was I was doing. There was no system making me fear failure. Only me. So why do we grind? For who? It's day in and day out, faster and faster, working harder and harder, not without a second to consider whether or not what we're doing is actually worth it. And at some point, as this cycle continues back and forth, faster and faster, you have to wonder, when can we get off?
When I was still in college for my degree in education, we learned about this dude named Erik Erikson, who was a developmental psychologist, like many, who tried to classify human development into sort of discrete categories, right? Like stages that go in a certain order and have certain characteristics. And Erikson, alongside Piaget and Freud and maybe Bandura, there's that one guy that did moral development, don't remember him. But these different psychological analysts were looking into the way that people develop over time and trying to summarize how people reach certain developmental stages throughout their lives. And Erikson specifically had this interesting approach to his developmental framework. He focused a lot on how each developmental stage has a conflict at its core, right? So babies face a conflict, toddlers face a certain conflict, and for the school-age children, the conflict that he focused on and came up with was called industry versus inferiority. Okay, the idea was that in school, you are encultured to focus on how well you perform in context of other people, and whether or not your performance is keeping up with your peers. And that makes me consider and think about the extent to which the subjects he was looking at were being influenced by the fact that they were, in fact, school age. I think it's no coincidence that the biggest conflict a child might face during school is whether or not they're keeping up. Are you staying on the grind? Are you inferior compared to your partners and peers? Are you industrious and being efficient and always working and performing the way that you're asked to? There are issues with this guy's framework, but I think that informs my perspective on this issue of the Grindset mindset, of always being focused on working and doing something productive. I think school makes you do that. And I'm sure you could look at it into it more and consider whether or not that's truly just human nature. But keep in mind, a lot of these developmental psychologists came to similar conclusions about the nature of shame and keeping up and other ideas like this. And the hope and idea is that maybe that information could help us raise more effective and healthy children in the long term. I don't talk about it very often, but in college, I graduated with a 4.0. And who did I do that for? Like, how did that actually help me in life? And why did I spend so much time constantly busy, constantly stressing, not a moment to reflect? Like, what did I do that for? And, I'm not saying that it isn't a good thing that in school and in life we're taught that hard work is a valuable skill and a valuable thing for a person to be able to call upon at will, right? Perseverance and focus are all very good and powerful things, but it comes down to this idea of meritocracy, right? Meritocracy is the utopian perspective on America, the hardworking, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps type of entrepreneur that works really hard and gets paid exactly as hard as they worked. And that's just objectively not how reality is. If you look at, for example, an Amazon worker, and you look at the revenue that they generate for Amazon, the company, compared to the amount of money they actually take home on as a reward for the work that they've done, the gap is like tenfold. Optimistically, the gap is like tenfold. You make $1 and the boss makes 10, literally. We're talking $380,000 of revenue generated per employee, and you would be hard-pressed to find a lot of Amazon workers making $38,000 a year. So what that means is that businesses are providing profit as a percentage on a margin. And you can talk about operating costs, but think about this for a moment. It is common wisdom to pay employees 30% to 15% of the revenue they actually generate. Now, again, back to that idea of operating costs, I don't care. Here's my perspective. If you can't afford to pay your employees at least half of what they generate for you and your business sucks and shouldn't exist. I don't care. Deal with it. If you cannot provide to the people the value that they create for you and your business, you're an asshole. Get over it. I own a sole proprietorship. I am my own employee. Do you think I would pay myself 30% of the revenue I generate? You would never do that for yourself. And it's absurd that bosses and CEOs and boards of executives think oh, no, I'll just take 70% off the top. And I know it's not 70%. Okay, I know it's more like 40%, but they didn't do anything. They didn't generate the value. The United States and most of the capitalist countries in the world are not meritocratic. They do not provide for you an equivalent value to the work that you put in. The work you put in is not the reward that you get out. And it could never really be 100%. We live in a universe of entropy, but not even half of the value you produce comes back to you. That's the issue. Poverty breeds a person to focus entirely on their needs. There's never time to think about what you want. There's only time to focus on survival. Because the next paycheck is the difference between homelessness or death. You can't afford medication, much less rent. And so the American dream becomes an American myth. A legend that you tell your kids, that people tell people if they work hard, they'll get by and survive, equivalent to the work that they put in. But that's just not true. It is a lie that people tell themselves in poverty in order to get through day to day. You can't rise and grind every day without knowing what you do it for, so you make up a god in the form of this American dream, this meritocracy that doesn't really exist. So you grow up broke. Your family grew up broke. This goes back generations. And all you have to keep yourselves optimistic is this idea that if someone has a bright idea, or if someone works particularly hard, maybe you can claw your way out of poverty just by working hard. And that's not true. When people claw themselves out of poverty, it's because of luck. It comes down to capitalizing on a lucky opportunity, which half of the time is like gambling and guessing. If you look at the data, it is clear that people are not compensated equally to the amount of work that they put in. And I'm talking about Amazon workers right now. Think about people that work in the restaurant industry, which technically has a better ratio of revenue to employee compensation. It's still awful. People are out here arguing that 30% of your business's revenue ought to actually go to the people that make your business exist. The funny comparison, though, is that if you look at a school building's operating costs, 70 to 80% of the revenue, of the monies, goes straight into teacher compensation, right? So it's ridiculous. You've got this thing that does work, right? The school systems suck, but school buildings certainly are not closing themselves just because of mismanagement, aside from principals sucking. But I mean monetary mismanagement. School buildings are running where 70% of the money is going into people's compensation. If they can do that, how the hell can your business that's making a ridiculous profit every year not pull that off too? I'm just going on a tangent at this point. The point is that I was broke growing up too. Most of my time had to be focused on the needs that I had in life, the medicine that we couldn't afford, the food that I wanted that was just too expensive, the experiences that my friends could afford and I never could. I was always focused on things that I actually needed to survive, and so I forgot to even consider what I want in the first place. And this system of poverty, the cycle of poverty that is merited on capitalism and how it's not a meritocracy out here, that cycle continues. It just keeps going because you need hope. When every day you rise and grind and tell yourself you're working hard, but no thing or no one truly recognizes or appreciates it, all you can cling on to is this myth. And listen, what sucks and what is hard is that I don't think there's any one perfect solution to escaping this mindset garnished on the capitalist endeavors and the system itself, the framework in which we live. I don't think there's any one way to escape this mindset for anyone in general. Like, there's no way to generalize a solution to this. All I can talk about is what I did. And all I'm doing is realizing that I could do what is expected of me. I could work a 9 to 5 for 40 hours a week for 40 years to get a home loan and then pay a mortgage for 40 years until I'm dead. Like, I could do that, right? But I realized that not once does that framework itself actually meet my wants. It only suffices my needs. And so the question becomes, how can I reorganize these two things and make it work at the same time? Like, what is it I actually need? Like, I just need to afford food and shelter and basic medicine. Okay, I don't need a car. I don't need to ever own a house traditionally. And I definitely don't need a traditional career. I want to meet my wants for the first time in my life, because now that I'm more stable than I've ever been, I'm finally pausing and reflecting. And it's not much value to say stop and smell the roses, but treat it like this. Every opportunity you take to pause and self-reflect and focus on what it is you actually want and not just your needs, every opportunity you take to do that sort of self-reflection, that is rebellion. That is resistance. That is fighting against the system that expects you to not do those things, and in fact is designed to not give you time to do them in the first place. That's why third spaces are so important. That's why the time that children spend not in front of teachers or in front of parents is so quintessential to their healthy development. That time that's called unsupervised in psychology. That's really important time for kids. And it's really important time for adults too. Otherwise, we spend our entire lives slaving away to this system, never once thinking about our wants, and instead having been conditioned to only consider our needs. And so it goes back to that question about the philosophy and psychology of Erik Erikson. Did the schools teach us to grind, or do we grind and so we built our schools? And frankly, I don't give a damn. What matters is what you actually want, not your human nature. It's what do you individually want and choose to pursue in your life. That is what is of value. So at the end of the day, here's what I want to say. Here's the quiet part for this video. This is not a conspiracy. This is not the Matrix. You're not Neo. This is your fucking life. You're not the chosen one. All we are and ever will be are just the people making choices. So pause and reflect and choose.